Okay, here we go. Chamocha. It all comes from this one verse of Chamocha be'elam Hashem, Chamocha ne'er kodesh. What do you mean, who is like you among the Elim? Comparing God to supernal beings, to all the great higher beings. Or what are we saying here? And we've come to the conclusion that we're saying there's no existence outside of God. What is that supposed to mean, there's no existence outside of God? We know the earth was created. The Torah itself tells us that. What's going on here? And the whole thing that we're trying to figure out is multiple parts, but one thing that we want to define is if we say that there actually are supernal beings, these great celestial beings or whatever it is, angels and high souls and stuff. So where do they fit into all this? Because if God gives angels these jobs to do and stuff, maybe they are in partnership with God, or maybe God created these other deities to be in partnership with him. That's kind of what we're looking at, and spoiler alert, we kind of reject it. But that led us into the whole idea about how everything has a spiritual source to it. It first brings us to the grass. It's not a blade of grass that doesn't grow without an angel that says grow. So spiritual source. Also, we say the grass made this decision that we're not going to crossbreed. So it's not the grass talking to each other. It's the angels that rule over the grass making this decision and then keeping the grass in line down here. That brought us to the rooster. Well, there's other things that happen in between, but it basically brought us to the rooster. When the rooster crows down here, there's a level of awakening. And then each realm, there's a level of awakening for that realm. So down here, it's a rooster. In the higher realms, it's the angel Gabriel. And the highest realm, it's the severities that are waking up what's called Machs of Atzilus, that's going down to feed the worlds the light that it got and say, hey, go back up again. Where did the 5 severity come from? The 5 organs that we use for speech. That actually brought us to this whole thing about snow, Shelag, where we say, how did God create the earth? He took the snow that was underneath his throne. So what's that supposed to be like? We have to have creation something from nothing. But even if you have all the spiritual parts, you have a progression, and they contract the light, contract the light, contract the light, that still doesn't get us the jump to the physical world, because it's just a contracted form of spirituality. That's cause and effect. So the lowest point of spirituality, we can see how it's connected and rooted in the highest point of spirituality. We see how we evolved or devolved to this point. That doesn't get us over to the physical world. Getting us to the physical world can only happen with the God factor in it. So the whole thing with the snow is that Shin is 300, Lamed is 30, and Gimel is 3. Hundreds, tens, and units. Doing the math backwards, so you go units, tens, hundreds, we get to thousands, and then 10,000s. 10,000s is the emanator. So it's not God as his essence, it's the light of God that starts creation. God as essence that we totally can't relate to. We have no idea what's going on there. We just know it's just infinite. That's the best we can do descriptively. We just don't know. It's just like the real core of God. Where, by the way, all things are basically same and equal in the core of God, because there is no multiplicity there. There's only wholeness and simplicity. Which is, last week I had the whole discussion with, this week I had a discussion about this. I don't remember how it got, Mendel and Chavez started saying this stuff. He was trying to say human beings are complex, and that's why we can't understand God, because if you, well, I'll say boil it down, but if you boil it down, God is really just, it's such simplicity. And that's the genius of it all, is that it's simplicity. It's wholesomeness. No, he said human beings are complicated. I was like, no, we complicate stuff. I think he was trying to say that people are multifaceted because there's a lot of parts to us. And God, there's not a lot of parts to him. He's just simplicity and wholeness. Within that wholeness is the potential for all the parts. But if you boil it down, you get to the essence of God. It's just wholeness. And the genius is in the simplicity of something. Like, think about different kind of magnet phrases and stuff. Why is a one-liner so good? And I don't mean just in a witty format, but those one-liners that we like to put on the wood pieces and on the magnets and stuff like that. Because it says something of great depth in so few words. How did you distill such a great concept down into a single line? The motivational quotes and the inspirational quotes and stuff like that. You could have books and books on these things. But somehow, if you could distill it into a single line, that's powerful and that packs a punch. The genius is in the fact that you were able to condense it into a single line. I was trying to say, like, the part that's hard for us that we grapple with is that God, he's just absolute simplicity. Like, it's too simple for us to understand that. Well, how did all this just fit into here? We can't get it. Like, what do you mean there's not multiple parts to you, kind of thing? We sort of ended up agreeing after going back and forth a little bit. But here, the description that we're talking about with 10,000s is not the essence of God. It's the once God is sending forth light or life force. Now this will be the life force of creation, which is actually the end chapters of Tanya, where it talks about like the Shekhinah dwells and has to go through the brain center of each world. The soul is in the brain, and from there it spreads out to each organ, and it gives power to each organ accordingly. That light, it's the aspect of God that brings about creation. So it's a very specific part of God. Here, that's what we're talking about. When we talk about the 10,000s, it's the emanator, it's the origin point of the light, and then it tenths itself and tenths itself. A lot of tenthing that goes on until we've distilled it, devolved it to the smallest part of spirituality, and then we have to make the jump to physicality, which is the whole next thing that we're speaking about how does that come to be, and which aspect of God makes it happen. Malchus of Atzilus, Malchus is kingship. You have the 10 spheres, these attributes are like the human body, the intellectual, the mochin, Chachma Beit Das, the intellectual faculties, wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, that's the brain. You go right hand, left hand, torso, etc. foundation that is basically procreation. Malchus is the mouth, because speech is all about the part now leaving the human body. Remember, man is called a medaber. The highest point of man is to leave his own self. So you only speak if there's somebody else around. You don't need speech if there's only one being in all of creation. Communication is for others. So it's the leaving yourself that you can reach your highest point. Malchus kingship, you can't be a king over your own kids. It's not being a king. And I'm just like, oh, I'm king of the house. Okay, well, that's nice. That's not real kingship. A king has to have a nation, and a nation is specifically apart from you. That's how you can have the relationship of king and nation. All the attributes feed into Yesod, and then Yesod gives to Malchus, and then from there it can feed out to everything else. Malchus is what goes on to the next stage. And then it becomes the top of what comes next. If you remember the word Hishtalshelus, the chain, because the bottom of the link is the top of what comes next. Now we've figured out where did the world come from? It comes from the snow. So now we've figured out what the snow is. So abundantly clear to us now how this all works out. Now that we've figured out where the world comes from, where the earth comes from, there was another thing that we said about where does light come from. Rabbi Shimon ben Yotzadek Shal, Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachman. So Rabbi Shimon ben Yotzadek asked Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachman, since I heard that you're a master of Agadot, tell me from where was the light created? So he answered, the text teaches that the Holy One enveloped himself in it, as one does with a cloak, and made the splendor of his glory shine from one end of the world to the other. It's a similar idea, question that we have with when he says, where did the earth come from? It came from the snow. So what is that supposed to mean? So really, we saw now with the whole Chassidic explanation, there's very deep stuff going on here. So we have a similar question. He says, you're a master of Agadot, tell me where the light came from. What do you mean? God said let there be light and there was light. That's not what his answer is. God wraps himself in a cloak and shines this. The brightness now spreads everywhere. And it's like, what? You can imagine that here as well, we're talking about something that's a little bit deeper than that. So here, versification. Where's this from? I think Daniel. The Vushe Kislag Chivar. His garment was as white as snow. It's using this description of that garment that God wraps himself in as white as snow. You could guess this garment that God's wrapping himself in is talking about a level of concealment. So through concealing the white garment, physical light is created through myriad evolvements. Basically the same idea, okay, that we still have to have all the spiritual evolvement / devolvement, and then we can make the jump from spiritual to physical. So the spiritual realm, that first point of when we actually start seeing a light creation, could go much higher above it to a point where we don't understand. But from the part that we have this visual, the imagery from, it's a garment white as snow or a talus. So it's the same idea as with the snow thing. Description of it is there's this bright light, per se, that the splendor of his glory shine from one end of the world to the other. So we have to conceal this quote-unquote white garment. Light is white. Well, it's brightness. It's kind of white. It's white, so the physical light also has to be created through myriad of elements. That's kind of just using the same idea. Okay, check out all this deepness. This is from, it's called Tikkun Zohar. We'll have a summary and then we'll go into the text of it. This is going to talk about this idea of these devolvements things, these spiritual things, how they're moving down, till we can get to the physical jump, which there's no description for the physical jump except for that it's a big leap that occurs. It shows all these different things that were created through this process. Hashem as he is in himself, as in to himself, God in his essence, cannot be described as anything but Ein Sof, as an infinite. Ein Sof means there's no end. God by himself, as in without any relation to the world or creation, is just, we can't describe it. Infinite, that's the best we could do. He's higher than all heights and hidden beyond grasp. By definition, no created being can have any sort of concept of what that is. He has no name, for he fills all names and is the perfection of them all. God is just the potential for everything in that state, but it's also so far beyond any of our understandings. Even angels, because angels are still created beings, nobody can grasp God in this state. And this is kind of what we're going to explain. The prophet Eliyahu opened and said, let's see what Elijah has to say. Exclamation that he's speaking out of God. Eternal hidden master of the world. You are he whose unity is infinite and absolute and therefore indivisible. Elijah is actually telling us about God in this. That God is unity, he's infinite, he's absolute, he's indivisible. You are he, by the asterisk, that's commentary that is filled in to explain what it's referring to. You are he, as in the first cause, God's the origin point. He's transcendent beyond all that is above and concealed behind all that is concealed. We can't approach or breach it. No thought whatsoever can grasp you. The original text for that is Leis v'achshav tfisa v'chlal. Came up a lot in Tanya, this verse, that we can't grasp him. So the whole thing with Torah study is because we can't grasp him, but we still have a mutual hug in Torah study because we're still learning God's wisdom, etc. But you're he who called forth 10 rectifications. We call them the 10 sefirot. Those are the 10 attributes. You had a world of chaos, and then God created a world of order. From that world of order is the progression to creation. The world that we live in is a world of order. Even if it seems like chaos, all the powering of this world is a very ordered system that brings it about. Those are those 10 attributes. They exist in us. They exist in the world. That's how the light moves through them until it gets here. It's a very ordered system. So these are these 10 orders that God created. It starts off with the 10th spirit of Atzilus, which is the highest world, the closest to God. It's kind of just an emanation because it's so close to God. It's not even like a created being almost. It's that first radiance from the sun, with which to regulate the powerful illumination of your light that flows down through hidden worlds that are not yet revealed. You can't go sun and shine on the crops. We have to have a process of the sunlight getting down to us so we can actually handle the light. So if we just have God from that original starting point of this will be the light and life force of creation, and boom, you just have creation, we can't exist. It's too much. They tried it already, it didn't work. The too many vessels, everything, all the broken vessels and stuff. We can't do that. We need the ordered process that God is tenthing the light. That is what we need to happen for us to be here and be able to function the way we do. For the world that God wanted to be, this world that we live in, the world that functions with us thinking that we're independent and having free choice and all that kind of stuff, this process has to happen. So we can't just go from light of creation to us. We have to have an ordered system. Powerful illumination of your light that flows down through hidden worlds that are not revealed, right? We know there are higher worlds that we can't see them. The world of Adam Kadmon and Atzilus. Adam Kadmon means it's primordial. Remember we had the Yama Kadmoni, the primordial sea? That was the last Maamar about the primordialness. Like that's like the template, the first kind. So Adam Kadmoni is like the template of man, like the first of all that stuff. And Atzilus that we know, as well as worlds that are revealed. These are the more revealed worlds now, you see? Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya. You guys don't see Bria and Yitzir and Asiya? No? They're revealed worlds. Why do you don't see them? These are worlds, well, we know also, these are worlds where creation actually starts occurring. It's not just the emanation. Bria, Yitzir, and down to Asiya, we start seeing angels in these. So you could actually have created beings here. So here it's considered more revealed world because we actually start seeing more a creation coming about. So revealed on our terms. For God, everything, there's nothing revealed, concealed, it's all, it doesn't make a difference to him. Indeed, it is through these, the 10th spirit of each universe, right? These 10 attributes, the 10th spirit, what they're called, of each world, that you are hidden from human beings, process that the light gets passed through, so they can exist and not be overwhelmed by your light, as we described. You are he who binds them, the spirit together, unifies them to yourself, and inasmuch as you are within them, anyone who separates one from the other is regarded as having caused a separation in you and your absolute unity. So anybody who does something to disrupt the order is considered someone who's caused a separation between you and your absolute unity. We have our behaviors, we have the way we're supposed to be, we know everything that enhances the unity, all the affirmation. Every time that we do what we're supposed to do, we affirm the unity. But if we start doing other stuff, then it's like we're disrupting the unity. God forbid. Continuing, you also arranged a system of 3 lower worlds, Bria, Yitzir, and Asiya, that serve as garments to further cover over the spirit of Atzilus and protect us from the intensity of your light. Part of the progression. It passes through the world of Atzilus, that first world. That's why Berea, now you could have angels, because the light has been contracted enough that an actual existence, an actual being could come into existence. Because once you go higher up, you can't be a separate being anymore. The closer you get to the sun, the less sun ray you have. You have to move more away from the sun to get more sun ray. And that's a contracted, condensed light. These lower worlds are the ones that are a little bit further removed. It is from these garments, it's called in these worlds, these garments, that the souls, Neshama, Ruach, and Nefesh of human beings originate. We have different levels of our soul. These levels originate. The spirit of Atzilus are clothed within these garments. They're called limbs of a body relative to the clothes that cover them. These limbs are arranged as follows. Here, this is the attributes that we said, how does it look on the human body? So chesed, or loving kindness, is the right arm. Gvura, restraint, discipline, severity, is the left arm. Tiferet, harmony, is the torso. That's the center. It's the perfect blend of chesed and gvura. Netzach, dominance. They also call it victory or endurance. And hod, splendor, acknowledgement, humility, because humility is the basis of acknowledgement. And hod are the 2 legs. Netzach, dominance or endurance, etc. And hod, humility, acknowledgement, are the 2 legs. And yesod is the foundation / the channel. See how it's calling it the channel now? Because it channels all those other ones. Is the body's extremity, the sign of the Holy Covenant. Bris, as in Malchus, kingship, is the mouth of the Holy Covenant. It is therefore called the oral Torah. Now we know where we get it, how all these line up with the human body. All this Eliyahu, basically Elijah, revealed to us. All this explanation about how the way God works in this ordered, unified system, which is reflected also on us. And also how the light has to be contracted, garmented, condensed to get down to be able to create us. What else? Eternal Master of the world. You are the supreme cause of all cause and the origin of all effects. You water the tree with the flow. That flow is the very life force of the tree, like a soul to a body, but no human likeness or bodily image exists in your infinite essence, with which we might liken you to anything within or without. Basically, we have no comparison for God. There's nothing, we can't make an image of him because we have no image of him. Literally, figuratively. You alone created the starry galaxies and the earth. From the galaxies above, you brought forth sun and moon, planets and starry constellations. On the earth below, you brought forth trees and plants, the Garden of Eden and fields of grass, living creatures, birds and fish, animals and humanity. Through them, as in through all that exists below, you make known that which is above. Everything that's down here reflects what's going on up there. You also make known how all that is above in Atzil, and below in Bria Tzia Nasiya is regulated in how the higher worlds may be known from the lower. But algebra essence is completely impossible. Eliyahu explains all this to us, and we have here also that he's talking about how the lower worlds reflect the higher worlds reflect the lower worlds, etc. There's a beautiful relationship going on here. With all that said, and we have all that figured out, the creation of a physical world cannot result from the cause and effect. Cause and effect would be the tensing process. So tensing the light, the spiritual light, that would be a cause and effect process. Because even if you get all the way down to the bottom of that spiritual ladder, per se, that spiritual progression, it's still not physical. And I can still see in that lowest spiritual point, I can still see how we got here from the highest spiritual point. Rather, something from nothing. The world was created as something from nothing. And by nothing, we mean there's no physical matter. There's only spiritual matter, which is like nothing because it's all submitted to God. Rather, something from nothing, there had to be a leap. A radical act of creation must occur, leading to the evolutionary process resulting in the finite and material. There's a leap that occurs from that lowest spiritual point to get to the physical point, and then the physical also has to have its progression for the world to exist. We know because we don't kick around in a world of raw materials. There was still creation of a physical world. But before you could actually create a physical world, you still have to have this whole process. First of all, the creation of all the spiritual higher realms, and also their progression, getting to a point, okay, now we've condensed the light enough that we could actually start creating physical matter. And when physical matter, now we could create a world. Leads us to the Tzimtzum Harishon. 2 Maamar ago, we did this in Bechol Davardar, that Egypt represents limitations. Mitzrayim is Meitzarim, limitations. How could Egypt exist in God's world? Because it's a counterpart for the first contraction. Egypt is considered a place of limitation, not just because we're in captivity, but because godliness is so concealed. That's how morally evil the place was. Anyways, you remember the Tzimtzum Harishon. So there's 2 phases. We have phase 1, for creation to occur at all. So this is even going up probably even to the top of the spirit realms. For creation to occur at all, a space has to be created. God had to like suck in his gut kind of thing. He had to create a void. It's a withdrawal of divinity into itself, allowing for the existence of worlds. Because if the sun just keeps being the sun, there's no place for sun rays. We need the sun to like hold back a little bit, to kind of remove itself per se, rein in the light so that we could have focused light. A withdrawal of divinity into itself, allowing for the existence of worlds. In a chain of creation, behind screens, curtains, partitions, that's all the tensing that goes on, is that the light gets condensed, dimming the intensity of light until it's incomparable to its original state. The light that finally creates the world cannot be compared to the original light. It's been so contracted. And we look at the round of the world and we're like, wowzer, look what God created. And it's like, I didn't even show off yet. Look, this is nothing. This void is the primordial space, was the first tzimtzum and radical act of creation, the divine self-limitation. Remember, that's how its limitation, Mitzrayim, Meitzarim, the counterpart of it is this limitation that occurs. So what's phase 2? Once we've created the void and the contraction, we now have what we call a kav. A kav is a line. Is a line, which is a ray of divine light, beams into the primordial space and is the source of subsequent emanations. So first, you have to create the void. Now, we have the void, first contraction. Now we can start sending in this highly condensed, highly focused light beam. Because if not, where is it going to shine? It's going to shine on the sun. I'm trying to turn a flashlight on at the sun. The only way the flashlight's going to have significance is if the sun is not beaming its light. The sun has to pull back its light for the flashlight to have relevancy. Once the sun pulls back its light, or once God creates the void, now we can have the light of creation come through. We call it the kav, the original line. A ray of divine light beams into primordial space and is the source of subsequent emanations. From here, we're going to have all the lights and the progressions, etc. The creative and vivifying force of creation. That's what it's going to be. So this light is going to be the immanence of Hashem in creation, while the concealed light, that's been contracted, we can't see it all, is the transcendence of Hashem in creation. Hold the thought. The kav undergoes numerous successive contractions and concealments in the chain of creation. We always come back to the contractions. There's different ways that God's light, or that God gives life to the world, and that God interacts and fills the world. And also this can be referring to different things. But here specifically, we're talking about the immanence of Hashem and transcendence of Hashem. It actually goes back to the idea of the neshama and the body kind of thing. There's God existing indiscriminately and just being a bright light within creation, versus the more specific life of God, which gives life to specific beings. This kind of takes it all to conclusion. But like, if you think about a person and a rock, what exists more? Not in a metaphorical sense, the literal sense. What is more in existence? A person and a rock are equally in existence. They're both here, are we not? If we're both here, then we both equally exist. But what shows the godly life force more? Well, that's a person. Because a person walks and talks and functions and grows and all that kind of stuff. The rock is dormant and silent. You don't look at a rock and you're like, oh, there's godliness. But for a person, we say that. We can say, oh, there's godliness. There's a soul in that thing. Where's the soul in a rock? And not a rock pet. There's a difference between a transcendence of God, which just everything is just being, Kind of like the light of the sun that just shines. It doesn't discriminate. It's there. But then there's also the immanence of God. There's also the more specific life force of God within creation. Two ways of this being. That's why they're using terms like immanence and transcendence. There's the aspect of God that enters into creation. There's a part of God that remains above creation. So the part of God that enters into creation is considered a more revealed because it actually brings creation about. And then there's a part of God that remains above creation that's considered concealed. It's part we can't relate to. Anyways, that's where it gets us to. Creation as it happens.